Hello, the internet. My name is Dean, and welcome back to the 20 and 20 challenge. This is week 5, part 5, and today we're taking a look at two things. We're going to be styling the application a bit more, so we're going to clean up the to-do list items, and then we're going to be changing the state when you hit submit on the form so that the form clears itself. And then the last thing we'll take a look at, so I guess we're technically taking a look at 3 things, but this one's kind of related to state, is setting a default value for the state. So like if you hit submit, it goes back to the default value, and when you load up the page, it's at the default value. And a good use case for this is like the YouTube descriptions, where they give me the option to have my social media links at the bottom of the description every time. So that's sort of how I use their default template system. So I say like, oh, for default, I want my Twitter account, my GitHub account, my, Instagram, all in my video description. And then every time I upload a new video, that's waiting for me. And then I just hit enter a couple times to move it down. I put my new content there, and I maybe change some things down below if I need to, but it saves me from having to copy and paste. So that's the other thing we're going to take a look at after we do those first 2 things. But that's enough for me. Let's go ahead and let's jump into some code. Okay, so the plan for today is we're going to be styling these paper cards and making them look a little bit better. So let's just go ahead and let's jump into it. We're going to be working largely out of our to-do item to sort of clean this up. So the first thing I guess we can do is let's go through our the return statement here, and let's just make sure this looks the way we want it to. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create an empty grid item here with an excess of 1, and I'm going to save this, and that'll force this to refresh, and you can see that pushes everything over a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a 10. And you'll see that pushes this over, and now we have an equidistant spacing on each side. It doesn't match up with the form, but we can get to that later. The next thing we have is this paper element, and I think it might make sense if we change the class here to be from root to paper, and then we can come up to our actual classes up here, and we'll throw in a comma, and we'll just do a paper. And inside of this paper, we'll do a margin of 1 EM, a padding of 2 EM, and 2 EM. Let me just save this so you can see what that change does. Nothing, of course. Let me actually get rid of this so you can see that we have removed the styling from our root element. So now if I put it back, you can see that it has basically reapplied it. The only difference here is this is in a different order. So up here we did padding first and then margin. So let's just leave it like, well, actually let's move margin up in both of these just so it's consistent and alphabetical. Otherwise it'll drive me nuts. The last thing I'd like to do is a text align, and I'm going to say justify. And what this is going to do is justify this text right here. So if I save this, you'll see all of this text sort of line up on the right side now. So now it looks a lot more like a block. So now we can come back down to our containers. And for the item task, let's actually put this inside of a typography block. So I'm going to say typography variant is equal to h4. And we'll have to give this a class name equal to classes dot, let's call this heading. And then we can come down to below this, and we can just close off this typography block. So now our props item should be inside of this element. If I save this, as soon as it finishes compiling, you can now see we have these bigger titles here. But one thing I would like to do is we can add in a heading right here just to change things, and we'll say heading, and we'll give this a text align of center. And that's just going to cause this to look a bit more like a title rather than just this bit of text. So it kind of makes sense that we're breaking it off from the body now. The next thing we can do is let's wrap everything in the body inside of a div. So we'll just say this is a div with a class name of, I guess we could do something like classes.todo body. Then we can move this down, and then we can save that, and then we can come up here, and at the bottom here we'll just say to do body is, it'll have like a padding of 1 EM. So once we have this padding set up, let's come back down here, and then inside of our div class name we'll just set another typography, and we'll give this a variant equal to body1. I think that's right. And then we can put the props item body inside of that. And then once we have that done, we can add a class for the HR. So say class name for this. And let's just give this a class of classes.divider maybe. Then we can come up here and let's put this, I guess, below root but above paper. So we'll say divider. And this will have a width of 25%. And it'll have a margin of 1 EM. And then we do need a comma after this to separate the divider from the paper. So that sort of sets it over here and right here. We haven't given this one a class yet, so let's go fix that. So for this one, this is also going to have a class name equal to classes.divider. So that's going to bump this over. And then we can, for, I guess, the HR over here for the classes divider, we can also take this and let's try bumping specifically the title one over so that it's halfway over. So we know that we gave this a margin of 25%. So what we have like 100% minus that 25%. And we need to take this and divide this by 2. So we know that our margin needs to be margin left of 37.5%. Sorry, we didn't give this a margin of 25%. We gave this a width of 25%. So 25% plus this will give you halfway. And this should bump it in the middle right here. Looks good. And you could also change this so this is like the upper divider and this is the lower divider if you wanted to. But I think this looks fine. It's like a little bit of a subtle touch and it's not entirely what you expect. I don't know if people like this or not. Again, I'm not a front-end designer, so I do apologize for that. But I think that about covers it for styling this this page. So if I just zoom out to like a normal size again, you can see that, I guess we should probably center this to-do stream, but you can see that this sort of looks a little bit better here. Let's actually change the paper and give this an elevation of maybe 6. Is that too much? Actually, I think we could probably even go higher. Let's try 10. How high can this go? Yeah, I think that looks better because now it's like actually sticking off. And then we can, of course, delete these if we wanted to. But let's change this to-do stream first. So let's come into our to-do list.js, I think. And this should have our title in it, right? Or is that in our app.js? App.js, okay. So this has a variant of h1, but we do need to actually give this some classes. So we'll say const use styles is equal to make styles. And I'm like using I'm using classes sometimes and inline styling other times just to sort of get everyone familiar with how both of them work. And not necessarily because it's best practice. Like right here, normally I just do an inline styling if it's just one element in a temporary application. But we can just say text align is center. Oops, center. And let's change this from root to heading. Not heading. Let's change this to title, app title, something like that. Or we could even do app underscore title. I guess that makes sense. So do that, and then we can come up here and we can say class name is equal to classes dot app title, and then we do need to actually say the class declaration. So let's import it first. We'll say import And then we'll use a, what is this, like a deconstructor. So make styles from at material UI core / make / styles, I think. Yeah, styles. So we can do that. And then it's going to yell at us because classes is not defined. So if I just zoom into like 150% again, which I'm assuming is what this is, but my pop-up window is not appearing. We can then come into here and we can say something like const classes is equal to use styles. Use styles. And if I save this, it shouldn't yell at us anymore. And now this is centered. So that looks good. Let's just add a new item here. So one new item with a very serious description. Okay. So the other thing we can do here is we can just change the state here. So when we do a submit, this should be clearing. I don't think we did that in a previous episode when we were supposed to. So let's come into our, I guess it's the to-do form, right? So the first thing we have to do in here, let's add the body in as well, because we do now have a body. And we should probably do this handle task change to also have a handle body change. So let me just grab this, and actually let me full screen this. So we'll grab this, paste it in here, and then below the handle task change, we'll also say handle the body change, and this will be a body in here, and that looks good. So that will change the state. Now we're not actually using the state, so let's say for the text field, this value should be this.state.task. And this value right here will be value equal to, oops, I did it again, this.state.body. So now if we do this, everything will work exactly the same. It's not going to clear when we do this. So like, let's test if this clears. And then we'll just say like, did it, oops, hello? Am I lagging? Did it, oh, wait, I messed up. Okay, so if I come into, this is actually a good point. So the reason why when I type in here, nothing is happening, when I'm typing, we don't have an onChange event being called. So we need to also add an onChange equal to this.handle body change. So what's happening is the value is set to this.state.body, which by default is the empty string. When I type in here, we're not changing the state because we're not calling the handle body change. So the state just stays the empty string, which means this is forced to have a value of the empty string. So that's where that error is coming in. So if we add in this onChange to handle the body change, which then sets the body to be the event.target.value, now if I type inside this body, so let's test this, does it work? You can see that the text here is now being added again. Now the problem is when we hit add task, the state for both of these is still let's test this and does it work, because we're not resetting the state. So the final thing we have to do here is after we do these form submits, we have to actually handle the case where, like, we do the form submits and then we want to say, okay, so I submitted the form, now I need to update my state. So I need to say this.setState, and we just want to basically nuke the state. So we want to say something like task is equal to the empty string and body is equal to the empty string. Now, let's say you had a default state here. So let me just save this and make sure you guys can see this works. So this worked. And then, huzzah. I'll add the task and that'll delete this. But let's say you had a default value here that you wanted to use and you didn't want to have these empty strings all over the place. One way that you can do this is you can just say like default task value and set this to be equal to like the empty string, and default body value equal to the empty string. Or to take this like a step further inside the constructor, you can just say let default task equal blank, and then let default body equal blank, right? And then if you want to grab these from the state, you just set both of these to be these values. So you set like this default task to be the default task body, and you set this default body to be the default body. And then for this, you can do the same thing here. So now this will live inside of your state rather than inside of like a constant variable. And you only have to change these in one location. So you just come up here, you change these, and this will change everything. So now if you want to, you can come down here, and instead of setting this to be the empty string, you just say this.state.default task, default task value, and then this.state.default body value. So if we come up here, that's this value and this value. And then if we want to, so if I refresh this, this will work. This works just fine. This doesn't work just fine. So let's change this to be, let's get rid of the this. I don't know why I had that there. Hello world. So now that's nuking it properly, or deleting it, whatever verbiage you'd like to use. But let's say you want to change this to be like my default task name and my default task description. So I save this. They have these, so maybe you always just want to give these like a default description, and then for the title you're like, okay, well I'll manually set this if I remember. And then you add the task, and then it'll change to the default task. So that's just another way that you could do this using states. And then you only have one place where you have to update these things. Okay, so that does it for today's episode. I'm not sure if there's going to be a part 6 and 7 coming, or if I'm just going to have 2 other videos coming. I need to sort of take a look at if there's something we can reasonably do in 1 or 2 parts for this project. Or if it's better to just do 2 miscellaneous tutorials. You know, it's always a bit of a juggling event. But yeah, that does it for me. If this video helped you, remember to like it. And if it didn't help you, remember to dislike it so that we don't subject other people to more bad tutorials. And if you want to see more of these, I'm making these for the next 15 to 14 weeks, depending on how you look at things, I guess. So there's going to be plenty more content. And then once the 20 and 20 challenge is done, I'll go back to posting regular content, whatever regular entails. So there's going to be more stuff coming after this is over, is basically my point. So maybe consider subscribing and clicking the bell down in the whatever it's called. So yeah, that does it for me. I will see you in the next episode or video, whatever I decide to do. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.